The hearing will come to order of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. This is an emergency hearing on Nagorno-Karabakh, and I put together very quickly and with a great sense of urgency. So I thank our two distinguished witnesses who have really made an enormous difference for being here today. Obviously, there's 120,000 ethnic Armenians who have been sealed off from food and medicine and are being starved to death by the government of Azerbaijan. In a few moments, I will introduce our two very distinguished witnesses. I'd like to recognize Her Excellency Lilit Mankuntz, Ambassador of the Republic of Armenia, and thank her for being here. Thank you so much. In the past week, feature articles in some of the world's leading newspapers have documented how in Nagorno-Karabakh, the starvation process has been advancing at a terrifying rate. This includes Nicholas Kristof's column that was just published. Another ethnic cleansing could be underway, and as he points out, or the headline points out, and we're not paying attention, which was published in the Post on September 2nd. This horrible crime, this crime of genocide, was planned, tested, and imposed by the government of Azerbaijan, that it is to say by President Aliyev, who rules Azerbaijan with an iron fist as a dictator. I have met with President Aliyev twice in Baku, 2 separate years, in 2013 and again in 2014. I talked to him very frankly about human rights abuses being committed by his government and him against Azerbaijanis and the abuse of his campaign to threaten and incite hatred against the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh. They were very tense conversations, but people, I do believe, parliamentarians and diplomats need to speak with candor, so there's no room for doubt as to where we stand. In 2015, I chaired a hearing on President Aliyev's unjust imprisonment of Radio Free Europe reporter Islam Manova. She broke the story about the corruption by the Aliyev administration, him personally, and she got a huge prison sentence. Over 7 years. And I never forget, I actually, at the hearing, we had the head of Radio Free Europe come and testify. You know, this is our organization, and even though she was an Azerbaijani woman, she was being totally maltreated, and we fought hard for her release. I also introduced legislation in 2015 and other years as well, kept getting blocked in this House, called the Azerbaijan Democracy Act. And it really laid out calling for the release of prisoners and for a amelioration of the human rights abuses being committed every day by the president. We are going to introduce a new bill. We're working on it right now, and I invite your input for its contents. It would be a Nagorno-Karabakh Human Rights Act. And the sooner we can get that written, and we're working on it already, and on the floor, it will put the House and hopefully the Senate and the President clearly on record in trying to speak out boldly, concisely, but boldly and accurately about what is going on. On June 21st of this year, I chaired another hearing on this terrible crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh. Some of you are here, and I thank you, David, for that testimony you provided. Sam Brownback and many other distinguished colleagues were here. The purpose was then to consider what could be done to safeguard and sustain the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. And we will continue to ask that question and to demand urgent and emergency action on their behalf. We must recognize that they're much more desperate now, and that 2.5 months of inaction raises the question whether there is within our own government any true will to help. Our first witness, Luis Morono Ocampo, was the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court from 2003 to 2012. A very, very distinguished man who did a tremendous job at the ICC. And he did an expert opinion on August 7th. He applied the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, Article 2C of the Convention, and he pointed out that it provides that genocide constitutes, quote, deliberately inflicted on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about their destruction. And he showed that all the elements of that crime were in early August actively present. He concluded there is a reasonable basis to believe that a genocide is being committed against Armenians living in Nagorno-Karabakh in 2023. His report received a great deal of attention and comment, and deservedly so. He reminded us that the Genocide Convention contains a duty to prevent. He stated that in order to secure jurisdiction to investigate and charge President Aliyev and other officials of his government with genocide, the procedure was for the UN Security Council to refer the matter to the International Criminal Court via a UN Security Council resolution, as happened in cases of Darfur in 2005 and in Libya in 2011. I would note parenthetically, and I know you've worked on that as well, those infamous cases. I remember going to Darfur and seeing the international community constantly demur in their willingness to finally charge Bashir with war crimes. There would be one Human Rights Council would have meetings. They would do a slap on the wrist against what was being done in Darfur and in other places. I went to Darfur and visited the camps, and it was a genocide, pure and simple. And yet the international community was lagging horribly behind. He points out there's a he reminded us that, like I said, duty to prevent, and that's a very important part. Yet in August, when the Security Council met in special session to discuss the crisis, neither the United States nor any other member took this action that was recommended to them. As many of you know, Armenians lived in Nagorno-Karabakh for over 2,000 years. As the Soviet Union collapsed and the states of Armenia and Azerbaijan emerged out of it, Armenians and Azerbaijanis fought a war. The war was driven in part by the fact that the boundaries of the new Armenian and Azerbaijani states did not correspond to the ethnic boundaries. Since 1994, Nagorno-Karabakh has been an enclave within Azerbaijan in which the Armenians have defended and governed themselves. They have been connected to the outside world by a limited access road called the Lachin corridor into Armenia, as per international agreements. Their independence has not been recognized by other countries, however, not even by Armenia. The government of Azerbaijan does not accept this and seeks to fully integrate Nagorno-Karabakh into Azerbaijan. Whatever we think of the goal of integration into Azerbaijan, what is totally and absolutely unacceptable is to achieve that through genocide. The government of Azerbaijan has never worked towards a solution that would address the fears of the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh, that integration really meant that would be a genocide, or they would be genocide and ethnically cleansed. Azerbaijan has repeatedly violated ceasefires and attacked Nagorno-Karabakh. The most aggressive attack came in 2020. Working together with the government of Turkey, Azerbaijan achieved military dominance over Nagorno-Karabakh and shrank the size of Nagorno-Karabakh enclave. Since December 12th of 2022, Azerbaijan has drastically reduced and then completely cut access to the outside world with the intent, evident intent, is to starve the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh to death. So it is very clear why the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh do not accept to be effectively integrated into the state of Azerbaijan. This would be a death sentence. The government of Azerbaijan has acted toward them murderous intentions. It is at one time, but it never has been doubted that there is a lack of good faith. The record establishing the murderous deeds and the intent of the government of Azerbaijan over the last 30 years is vast and shocking. Nothing has changed in recent years. We will hear testimony on this point from David Phillips, and I have read your testimony. It is incisive, and I deeply appreciate the time you spent working on this and over the years, but today too. He is director of Columbia University's Atrocities Project, and I invite you to visit the website. The many horrific and sickening atrocities committed in recent years and documented on that website bear witness to the depths of to which humanity can descend when a government subjects its people to a campaign of incitement of hatred. The International Criminal Court referred to this as, quote, obsessive and continuing expressions of hatred for persons of Armenian national or ethnic origin emanating from Azerbaijani officials, including the president, close quote. In fact, that government taunts the very people it is starving, as when President Aliyev said his blockade is necessary to deal with the smuggling of cigarettes and iPhones. And Azerbaijan's ambassador to the UN held up photos of supposed residents partying and enjoying the high life. I mean, what a Potemkin village that paints. So as our government is leading discussions with Azerbaijan and Armenian leaders, Congress has a responsibility to ask several questions, including one, whether this is a genocide, two, what is the U.S. government's duty to prevent as provided in the Genocide Convention, three, does the U.S. have an additional level of responsibility in the duty to prevent that comes with having undertaken a mediating role so that it does not become guilty of the complicity of genocide under Article 3E of the Convention. I note that Mr. Ocampo's written testimony says that, and I quote, the risk of complicity is expanded by the U.S. active role in the negotiation. Any assistance from the U.S. to President Aliyev that could be deemed to facilitate the blockade could be considered complicity in genocide, close quote. U.S. complicity would not require genocidal intention, rather knowledge that the government of Azerbaijan has this intention, as well as, quote, some positive action to aid or assist the blockade, which would include actions encouraging the government of Azerbaijan in its genocidal course, such as pressure on the Armenians. These are legal standards, which we have very little information of what the U.S. government is doing. In fact, opaqueness that has been created around the U.S. government's involvement in this crisis. This appears maybe to be by design. For example, this hearing has two empty chairs. Two, those of U.S. Department of State and USAID. I requested that both provide a witness for this hearing. Despite repeated requests by phone and email, neither responded. Not even a response. Since 1995, I have chaired hundreds of hearings with State Department or USAID witnesses. This is a unique case of absolute non-response. Now, if they said they want another day, I'll set a hearing anytime, any place for them to give their presentation. But no response. Also, for many years, Congress has been appropriating significant funds for humanitarian assistance in Nagorno-Karabakh, but USAID will not respond to inquiries as to when it last delivered assistance into Nagorno-Karabakh. Armenian sources report that assistance was last delivered in 2020. This is a very significant signal, not a good one, to President Aliyev. The government of Azerbaijan has been testing the will of the U.S. government. It conducted a test on December 12th when Aliyev permitted Azerbaijanis without formal ties to the state apparatus to block the Lachin corridor. And at that point, he still denied his involvement, and sometimes some food and medicine were permitted. President Aliyev tested us again when he escalated, completely sealing off the Lachin corridor. Our government has utterly failed both tests. Each time the U.S. government made no significant response. Requests in bland bureaucratic language does not count, not when people are being subjected to genocide. Today, the State Department issued a readout of Secretary Blinken's September 1st call with President Aliyev. Quote, concern over the deteriorating humanitarian situation, reiterated our call to reopen, underscored the need for a dialogue and compromise. This is completely inadequate, and I believe it is insulting. One side is committing genocide against the other, and the State Department expresses concern, urging the victim to dialogue and to compromise. Of course, we know the Biden administration does not want this genocide to advance to a horrible consummation in the death of the people there or to their ethnic cleansing. Yet that is where events are headed, and the administration, having failed so many tests, the course will now be difficult to reverse. I respectfully urge the administration to please wake up, recognize the absolute grave responsibility it has here, and focus on finding and implementing a humane solution now. And this must mean that the blockade is lifted and the people continue to live in its ancient homeland. It's now a three-alarm fire that's getting worse by the moment. Again, I want to thank you for being here. I'd like to now turn to brief introductions. First, I'll begin with Luis Morenno Ocampon. Let me get my glasses, please. Who was the first prosecutor, June 2003 to June of 2012 at the new and permanent International Criminal Court, or the ICC. His office was involved in 20 of the most serious crises of the 21st century, including in Iraq, Korea, Afghanistan, and Palestine. He was very, very, very effective in so many of these issues, including going up against Omar Bashir, And frankly, I met with Bashir in Khartoum, and he was not happy with the indictment for genocide in Darfur. The former president of the Ivory Coast, Joseph Kony, and the former vice president of the DRC. Previously, he played a crucial role in the transition to democracy in Argentina, and as a deputy prosecutor in the junta trial in 1985. And what a long list of accomplishment in promoting justice, and it's just awe-inspiring. We'll then hear from David Phillips, who's an academic visitor at St. Anthony's College, Southern European Studies at Oxford University, and an adjunct professor, Security Studies Program, School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. He previously served as director of the program on peacekeeping and rights at Columbia University's Institute for the Study of Human Rights. He has served as a foreign affairs expert and a senior advisor to the U.S. Department of State during the Clinton, Bush, and Obama administrations. He chaired the Turkey-Armenia Reconciliation Commission and directed the Track 2 program on Turkey and the Caucasus. He also authored many books, including Unsilencing the Past, Track 2 Diplomacy and Turkish-Armenian Reconciliation, and the Turkey-Armenia Protocols, A Diplomatic History. Two amazing witnesses. I yield the floor to Mr. Ocampo. Before I go any further, I do want to say that my good friend and colleague, Jim McGovern, does send his best. He's fully in accord with this hearing. Was truly unavoidably attained. He could not be here, but he is here in spirit. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a big honor for me to be in front of you. I really appreciate the urgency you instill to these proceedings because Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh need you. They need you to make the never again a reality. And never again is really still never again because it happened before. 1915 was a genocide against Armenians. No, never again for them. It's really never again. And then count on you, I think. Let me summarize my report. Professor Phillips had much more longer experience with me on this issue. I just was approached in July to evaluate the situation. And what I saw was, okay, this is ongoing genocide. It's happening now. Because normally people believe genocide requires many persons dying, killings, gas chambers. Okay, there are different forms to commit genocide. One form requires zero victim. Genocide under Article 2C requires just create the conditions to destroy the people. So the crime is create the conditions. And blocking the Lachin corridor with the life system for the Nagorno-Karabakh people is exactly creating the conditions. And for me, it was easy to reach the conclusion because I found the International Court of Justice say that. So I did not need to go to the field to get investigation because 15 judges of the International Court of Justice in The Hague review the issue. They listen Armenia and Azerbaijan representatives, and they concluded that blocking the Lachin corridor was creating an imminent risk for the life of the Armenians living in Nagorno-Karabakh, and they considered this group was targeted. So what is called the material element of the genocide was obvious there. The issue, and normally the most difficult issue, is the intentions. Can we say President Aliyev or someone else in the Azerbaijan state has genocidal intentions? And my decision was, instead to follow different quotes, there's something very clear. The facts speak for themselves. Because in December 22, as you mentioned, the blockade of the Lachin corridor started and was done by people not formally connected with the states. However, in January that year, Secretary of State Blinken, in January 2023, called President Aliyev, asking him to remove it. President Aliyev did not follow the request. In January. February, the International Court of Justice unanimously said to President Aliyev, this is creating risk for the life of the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, in order to open the corridor. He did not follow. What he did instead was to create a security forces corridor, a blockade. He blockaded the corridor now with his own security forces. And that is for me a very clear signal, okay, he knows the blockade produced risk or life or death. So when he is doing this now with security forces, obviously he has intention to produce that. And that intention is confirmed because a few months later, he sell off all the traffic. So that way for me, at this stage, there's no doubt that the genocidal intentions are there. Of course, we are not discussing case in a court. In a criminal case, President Aliyev will have a chance to explain his position. But here it's like a starting investigation with reasonable basis to believe, and that for me is clear. What is different, and that's why I'm thanking you for inviting me, because I was thinking, okay, what do the U.S. position? U.S., as Azerbaijan and Armenia, is a state party of the Genocide Convention. As such, has a duty to prevent and to punish. And you mentioned the possibility how to punish. I think punishment could be there, but the urgency is to prevent the harm for these 120,000 people. Because even though the genocide is already committed under 2C, requiring no result, other forms of genocide, including 2B, that require bodily or mental harm, could be produced. And then it's one genocide already committed and one which is coming. So, and that's why I was thinking, okay, you have to prevent that genocide. They stop the one already happening and prevent the one who is coming. And on that, what I feel, and that's why this commission meeting is so important, the hearing is so important, the first step is to remove the denial. Samantha Power wrote a book explaining in detail how historically in Armenia in 1915 with the Nazis, with Rwanda, there was tendency to deny the genocide, strong incentives to deny the genocide because there are other political interests. And that happened again here. But okay, it's a genocide. We cannot deny. And then this meeting that you invite us to be here could be probably a turning point on denial. So denial means this International Court of Justice, talking about prevention duties, says as soon the government should know that something could happen, should act. And it says specifically, state parties should not wait for the genocide to commence. As soon as there's some early warning, should act. So here we are late because in January, Secretary Blinken was right, understanding something wrong is coming, but now after the confirmation of the genocidal will, it's time to be stronger. That's why my main suggestion to this commission is to send information to the executive branch, telling them, look, this is happening now. You have to know this, because that is something critically important for you. Why is important? In this particular case, U.S. is deeply involved in a negotiation. But as you mentioned, the negotiation is between a genocider and his victims. It's like you cannot ask for a negotiation between Hitler and the people in Auschwitz. It's not a negotiation. You have to stop Auschwitz and then discuss negotiation. And that is, I think, the sequence here. The first step, you cannot be involved in a negotiation when President Aliyev used genocide as a method of the negotiation. That's simple. And the risk I presented in the paper is, if you do that, knowing that President Aliyev using genocide and trying to deny the genocide, the U.S. assistance to deny the genocide could be considered complicity. That's why it's not just what President Aliyev is doing. I think we should also understand what is happening here in Washington. And in this sense, I think your contribution is critical to transform. Stop the denial, recognize the genocide, stop, prevent, and protect the life of the 120,000 Armenians living in Nagorno-Karabakh. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ocampo. Mr. Phillips.
both co-chairman of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, for your work on this issue. I also want to thank Mr. Ocampo for his very clear-eyed statement about the genocidal intent of the Aliyev regime. Thank you for that. During the Commission's June 21 hearing, I outlined a record of the Aliyev regime's admission of genocidal intent and partnership with the Erdogan regime in actions to erase the Armenian physical, religious, and cultural presence in Artsakh, and eventually the Republic of Armenia, which has now been whittled down to a fraction of its historical size and seen the elimination of all of its Christian population and churches. I refer the Commission again to the Cornell University site, which uses advanced satellite technology, bearing witness to this erasure. The language used by President Aliyev and his officials leaves no question about their genocidal intent. Other genocide prevention scholars, human rights organizations, and lawyers have raised the alarm. Independent media and travel blockades imposed by Azerbaijan and the Russian Federation, which has control as the peacekeeper, confirm the intent and plan to commit genocide. From my own experience attempting to engage Azerbaijani civil society in a dialogue, I can confirm that even the most committed Democrats there are hesitant to live with Armenians because they fear government retribution. President Aliyev himself has mandated education, public campaigns, censorship, and other methods aimed at dehumanizing Armenian Christians. A recent poll by the Free Alliance of Euro-Asian Sociologists showed that 60% of Azeris believe that Armenians will be, quote, killed or displaced. In June, along Michael Rubin and Ambassador Brownback, I noted some overdue concrete steps the United States should take to prevent the current course of conduct and bring more credibility to U.S. positions on democracy, human rights, and the consequences for atrocities. Democratic institutions in Artsakh and Armenia make them natural allies of the United States. The recommendations that I made in June include sanctions from Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act, the Humanitarian Aid Corridor Act, which you authored many years ago, and the Global Magnitsky Act to begin. The United States has repeatedly called for the opening of the Lachin corridor, again as recently as August 31, 2003. U.S. officials stated, "We reiterate our call to immediately reopen the Lachin corridor to humanitarian, commercial, and passenger traffic." That was followed by additional Azeri violations of ceasefire terms and the taking of 3 Armenian lives. It is argued that sanctions are not always effective, and that is true. The significant role Turkey and Azerbaijan have played helping Russia and others evade sanctions is all too easily overlooked. Azerbaijan does not have a diversified economy. It relies on oil and gas resources, and the levels of corruption by the Aliyev family are well documented. Freezing accounts and financial resources of officials and corrupt leadership responsible for genocidal activity would be more effective in Azerbaijan than it would be elsewhere. If the situation is not dramatically reversed soon, the U.S. and its allies should give the Armenians the means to defend themselves in exercise of the duty to prevent genocide, lest history repeat itself. The U.S. announced today joint military exercises with Armenia. This is a small step, but a step in the right direction. Today, the world's attention is focused on the Azeri blockade of the Lachin corridor, which is in violation of its own 2020 signed obligations. It must respect the 5-kilometer wide corridor from Armenia to Artsakh under Russian control. The International Court of Justice requires enforcement of that obligation, which was also discussed at the hearing here in June. This blockade began with so-called Azerbaijani eco-activists who colluded and worked with authorities to gain access to the Lachin corridor and block it. I think I understood, Mr. Smith, that you said they had no relation with the government of Azerbaijan. There is ample documentation that they were agents of the government. Right. And they left when the Azeri government established its own checkpoint to block the road. This checkpoint has also been used to take hostages, including recently students going to college in Yerevan and a patient being transported by the ICRC. Predictably, the situation has deteriorated. Therefore, I call on the Commission to pay attention to individual perpetrators who have evaded sanctions or any consequence to their actions, which has enabled further atrocities and genocidal acts. In the fall of 2020, in response to unprovoked attacks against the Armenians in Artsakh, I undertook a research and documentation project in cooperation with Columbia University and the Artsakh Human Rights Ombudsman. The documentation project was envisioned as a deterrent to future crimes. The project bears witness to crimes against humanity and preserves evidence to hold the perpetrators accountable. And I do hope we move from advocacy to trial in the not too distant future. Azerbaijan's aggression, known as the 44-day war, ended on November 10th with the signing of a trilateral statement between Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia. The Artsakh Atrocities Project provides information on Azerbaijan's systematic effort to drive Armenians from their homeland through killings, ethnic cleansing, and deportations. That constitutes crimes against humanity, as well as other atrocities committed by Azerbaijani armed forces and nearly 2,000 Turkish-backed Islamist fighters. Their presence on the battlefield is noteworthy. More than 3,900 Armenians died during the 44-day war, beginning on September 27, 2020. And over 100,000 civilians were displaced. There are numerous verified cases of Azeri soldiers mutilating dead bodies, beheading and executing both combatants and civilians, and using banned weapons such as cluster bombs and white phosphorus gas. The Artsakh Atrocities dossier includes reports from the Ombudsman on Human Rights in Artsakh and reports from other reputable human rights sources, news articles and opinion pieces covering the events, password-protected videos, some of them with very gruesome imagery, steps to target culture, efforts by humanitarian agencies involved in the conflict, information on hate crimes in the West, and information on specific perpetrators in the conflict who have committed war crimes. It also addresses the question of Armenian prisoners of war who were detained. Since December 12th of 2022, Azerbaijan's blockade of the Lachin corridor has deprived Armenians of external contact and precipitated a humanitarian emergency. These events constitute a second Armenian genocide. With the blockade's consequences becoming more urgent and Azeris firing on Armenian farmers and committing other atrocities, there is ample evidence of the Aliyev regime's implementation of its genocidal intent. Making farmers sniper targets physically prevents harvesting to feed the population. It also has a psychological impact, preventing farmers and gardeners from going to the fields lest they be shot. There is ample evidence of the Aliyev regime's implementation of genocide. Even if the Lachin corridor is open, the Aliyev regime has never held to a ceasefire or other agreement, so we can expect additional crimes in the future until perpetrators are publicly held to account. These include top leaders of Azerbaijan, such as President Aliyev, his wife, the first vice president, and their inner circle, including the foreign minister, defense minister, and presidential assistant Hikmet Hajiev. President Erdogan and his foreign minister are also culpable. Before turning to lower-level individual perpetrators identified on the Columbia Research website, I would like to call attention to some of the more current perpetrators and their crimes. An Azeri attack on Sev Lake, the Black Lake, on September 13th, 2022, prior to the blockade of the Lachin corridor and in violation of the ceasefire, deployed Azerbaijani special forces to attack the lake region. A video released in early October and verified by independent media showed extrajudicial killing of at least 7 Armenian military personnel who were captured as prisoners of war. This extrajudicial killing was conducted when the Armenian military personnel were already bound and disarmed and in custody of Azerbaijan. Those directly responsible for these murders are Elshan Tarlanovich Sanayev, a colonel in the Azerbaijani Armed Forces in the Ground Forces Command, and Anvar Zakaria Oglu Afandiev, a lieutenant general in the Armed Forces. The so-called eco-activists who initiated the blockade did not represent environmental causes prior to the blockade, as documented through the report entitled The Azerbaijani Government's Eco-Activist Agents, Evidence of State Control and Hatred, which is available on a link provided by the Titoian Foundation. The reports note that several were prominent in entities which received U.S. funding. One of those actors deserves special attention for his candid video in March 2023, in which he stated, "We will soon slaughter an Armenian for Nowruz and will add his blood on the kebab." We've also compiled data on the perpetrators in the 2020 44-day war. We spotlight Turkish commanders overseeing and advising the operations, Azerbaijani military actors commanding soldiers and mercenaries, mercenary leaders hired and supported by Turkey, and jihadis. Atrocities include torture, execution, mutilation, disappearances, and mistreatment of POWs. In violation of the November 2020 tripartite statement ending hostilities, Azerbaijan was to release all Armenian prisoners. It not only violated that agreement, but it took new prisoners in Armenian territory and then repeatedly lied about the prisoners it was holding. This is an extremely emotional issue for the Armenian people. The fact that these practices are continuing and the Azeri government continues to deny them merely rubs salt into the wounds. I want to provide you with some illustrative examples of Armenians that have suffered. Arsan Garakanyan, in the battle for Lake of Hadrut in October 2020 of the 44-day war, was captured by Azerbaijani military personnel. These included Arsan and his son. Both were taken captive by Azerbaijani military personnel and taken to prison in Baku. Sasha was released in December 2020, but Arsen remained in captivity. Videos were released on Azerbaijani social media in January of 2021 showing Arsan being forced to say that Karabakh belonged to Azerbaijan and insulting the Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. A motion was passed by the European Court of Human Rights calling for Arsen's release in mid-January. Unfortunately, Arsan's body was discovered in a small town east of Hadrut days later. He had been tortured and shot. Then there's the story of Benik Hakobian and Yuri Adamyan. Following Azerbaijan's capture of Hadrut on the 15th of October 2020, a number of videos were released. These included images of the capture and extrajudicial execution of Benik Hakobian, 73 years old, an ethnic Armenian civilian and a resident of Hadrut, and Yuri Adamyan, also an ethnic Armenian and resident of the village of Tayak, who had volunteered for service at the start of hostilities. The videos were verified by independent media investigations. In the video, Hakobian and Adamian are clearly captives and positioned against a wall before a voice speaking Azerbaijani in a native accent says, "Aim for their heads." Not surprisingly, they were both killed. The story of Gennady Petrosyan, 69 years old, who comes from the village of Matatashin. Petrosyan refused to evacuate his home during the 44-day war in 2020. On October 28th, he called a close friend and neighbor who'd already been evacuated, asking for help to flee. There was no further news from Petrosyan. Videos were shared on Telegram, verified by independent media, of the beheading and desecration of Gennady Petrosyan. Turkish commanders and other personnel were also deeply involved in these events. To name a few, I'll mention Defense Minister Hulusi Akar, Lieutenant General Seref Angay, commander of the 3rd Army of the Turkish Ground Forces. The Armenian delegation at the OSCE says he, quote, took part in planning and conducting Artsakh operations. Major General Bahtiyar Ersey, who is officially titled Chief of Operations Directorate of the Land Forces of Turkey, oversaw the Azerbaijani General Staff in Artsakh. Ersey has been seen wearing Azerbaijani military attire, and it is likely he is a de facto in charge of the Azerbaijani armed forces. Major General Göksel Kaya is an important Turkish drone commander who oversaw the well-documented use of TBT drones. These drones were instrumental in Azerbaijan's victory and made possible human rights abuses against civilians. Adnan Taraverdi is a retired Turkish general and founder of Sadat Inc., an international defense consultancy. He and Sadat have played an important role in recruiting, equipping, and transporting about 3,000 Syrian mercenaries to Libya and Artsakh. Sadat is also the primary organization training Turkish-backed mercenaries. Let me briefly mention some of the Azerbaijani commanders as well. Lieutenant General Hikmet Mirzayev is head of the Azerbaijani Defense Ministry's Special Forces, which played an active role in 2016 and 2020. Many Special Forces members were trained by Turkey. Personnel under Mirzayev's command engaged in the killing of civilians, body mutilation, and beheadings. In 2020, Special Forces under his command were likely responsible for the execution of 2 Armenians in Hadrut, 2 beheadings, and numerous war crimes in Shushi. Major General Hikmat Hasanov is commander of the 1st Army Corps of Azerbaijan, which covered the northern front line of the Artsakh conflict. Major General Mais Bakudarov is the commander of the 2nd Army Corps of Azerbaijan. Military personnel under Bakhturov's command engaged in war crimes, committing atrocities against the civilian population of southern Artsakh in 2020. Major General Zaur Sabir Memdov is deputy head of Azerbaijan's Special Forces Command and is credited with the capture of parts of southern Artsakh, including Sushi. He was responsible for taking hostages, killing civilians, and vandalizing religious sanctuaries. In the village of Karantak, outside of Sushi, Memedov's forces kidnapped, tortured, and murdered 58-year-old Armenian. In addition to a woman with mental disabilities, at least 33 Armenian civilians have been confirmed dead. Colonel Tehran Mensimov is the commander of Nachikovan Army's Special Forces. On October 28th, his troops kidnapped multiple Armenian civilians, including a 72-year-old Arega Shakhdelian and her husband Edward. The latter died in captivity under, quote, unclear circumstances. Azerbaijan's special naval forces were responsible for war crimes against civilians. They kidnapped 71-year-old Sasha Garakanyan and his 44-year-old son Arsen. Arsen appeared in degrading Azerbaijani propaganda videos and was subsequently killed and shot and killed. The naval forces are easily identified by the distinct pattern of camouflage of their uniforms. And not to be outdone, President Aliyev awarded medals to members of the Azeri military who were known for their particularly gross atrocities. Captain First Rank Zaur Guliev, commander of the 641st Unit, which fought in Hadrut. Captain Second Rank Orhan Gasimov was responsible for the capture of Sushi and committed war crimes there. Captain Second Rank Shafi Sultanov. Captain Third Rank Farhad Ismailov. Captain Third Rank Ilgar Nurmamedov. And Captain Third Rank Eldar Panahov, as well as Captain Third Rank Babak Shirinov, were awarded for their role in the capture of Hadrut. And then on top of this, there are a list of jihadi mercenary leaders. Saif Balud, also known as Saif Abu Bakr, was the leader of the Syrian National Army's Hamza Division. He and approximately 500 of his men were flown to Azerbaijan to join fighting in Artsakh. Fahim Isa led the NSA's Sultan Murad Division, particularly notorious for atrocities as well in Syria. Abu Amsha, whose real name is Mohammed al-Jassin, is a leader of the Suleiman Shah Brigade, also well known to us. Others with links to these crimes include Ahmed Osman, Mohammed al-Abdullah, Fadlallah al-Haji. The prosecutor's offices of Azerbaijan and individual prosecutors are also implicated. They pursued criminal charges against Armenian POWs, an issue which is particularly near and dear to me because of special conferences that we held on the POW issue. The prosecutor's office includes personnel who were responsible, including Jehun Azadaliev, Orhan Samadov. Other prosecutors are Vugar Guliev, Zia Mansurov, Paviz Mir Hashimov, and Babakan Hasanaliev. Judges involved in the trial of the Armenian POWs included a team of jurists led by Faik Kaniev, the presiding judge, and a panel of judges consisting of Eldar Asamiliov, Javid Husseinov, and Samir Aliyev. The recent University Network report confirms that Azerbaijan continues to capture Armenians outside of the hostilities, including civilians, and uses coerced self-incrimination, torture, and degrading treatment. These Armenian POWs were detained in undisclosed sites in Baku prisons, while Azerbaijan denied knowledge of detainees, locations to their families, the ICRC, and the Armenian government, despite video evidence that numerous individuals were in custody. This information was provided to us by the Human Rights Network. So let me just say in conclusion a couple of words about recent developments. We know that the Lachin corridor has been blocked, effectively severing the sole connection between Artsakh and Armenia, as well as the outside world. Presently, as a result of these actions, over 120,000 innocent civilians, including 30,000 children, have had their lives put at risk. As a father of 2 teenage girls, I'm particularly attentive to the plight of children in this conflict. The ICJ ordered, quote, the Republic of Azerbaijan shall, pending the final decision in the case in accordance with obligations under the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, to take measures at its disposal to ensure unimpeded movement of persons, vehicles, and cargo along the Lachin corridor in both directions. The humanitarian crisis has worsened starting on June 15th when the Red Cross, the sole humanitarian organization with permission to access Artsakh, has been denied entry to deliver food and medical supplies. This was a clear violation of the International Court of Justice's order, as well as the ceasefire agreement signed by Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia in November of 2020. Azerbaijan has ignored calls from distinguished international leaders such as the UN Secretary General, the US Secretary of State, and the President of France to comply with the ICJ binding order and open the Lachin corridor. The Russian peacekeeping contingent entrusted with safeguarding this route is also responsible. President Aliyev acts with impunity, rebranding and exporting Russian oil and gas to Europe, this at a time when Western sanctions against Russia are trying to limit its income, which is used in the Ukraine war. So let me suggest here that the Lachin corridor must be opened immediately to humanitarian, commercial, and passenger traffic. Gas, electricity, and internet and air connections should be restored. If Russian peacekeepers cannot maintain order, they should be supplemented or replaced. POWs must be accurately accounted for and released. And representatives from Baku and Stepanakert must agree urgently on modalities for transporting emergency provision. The Minsk group mediation can be helpful here. There is urgent need for discussion on all humanitarian, security, and political issues. So this tragic tale of woe is an opportunity to learn some lessons. The international community failed to sanction individuals who committed crimes after the wars in 2016 and 2020. Its message of failure sent a communication to the government of Azerbaijan that it can act with impunity and escape repercussions for its crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, and acts of genocide. This signaled Azerbaijan, as well as other regimes around the world, that they can escape consequences for violating international humanitarian law and committing crimes against humanity. Having worked extensively in Burma, I have the Burmese people in mind here. History shows that appeasement exacerbates conflict. Neville Chamberlain should have learned that lesson. A world order to which Americans aspire requires a response when crimes against humanity are committed, lest perpetrators conclude that they can escape criminal prosecution, asset freezes, and travel bans. I want to thank Congressman Smith for the opportunity to present this testimony, and please to accept questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Phillips. And you know, the long list of atrocities that you have articulated certainly cries out for prosecution. It cries out for, at a minimum, Department of State. Just a few questions, because your testimonies have been extraordinary. You know, I agree with you, Mr. Ocampo, when you talked about Samantha Power's book and the fact that she raised a number of terrible genocides that went largely unattended to as they were happening, and even after the fact. I worked very hard with regards to Srebrenica, and was chairman of the Helsinki Commission for years, and we couldn't get a recognition for that horrific human carnage. And I was actually in Srebrenica for a re-internment of a number of people killed in mass by the Bosnian Serbs. It was just a horrible, I mean, Milosevic and company committed atrocities every day of the week, and you know, the West pretty much, particularly in the beginning, looked the other way. It was awful. And Rwanda, we all remember what happened there, and I chaired hearings on that as well. And you know, so you know, we don't seem to learn from these past mistakes of failure to appreciate where something is heading, or we just don't want to address it in the robust way it needs to be done. I'm wondering, you know, how many people, you know, how long can they last? You know, it's not just food, which is obviously absolutely essential. And the more fragile the person is, elderly or children, pregnant women, small children, the more vulnerable they are. And I'm wondering if there's any kind of assessment as to, you know, as how much longer they can survive this blockade in Nagorno-Karabakh. I'm wondering, you mentioned, you know, either supplanted or replaced with regards to the peacekeepers put there by Russia. Is there a feasibility of some other kind of peacekeeper, you know, whether it be UN or some other multinational effort that could be made? Is there any feasibility for an airlift? I mean, we did the Berlin airlift. You know, we've done things like that in the past. Because, again, I read that article just a few days ago where the mayor of Paris, with about 10 big trucks in a convoy, were blocked. There's the mayor of Paris saying, I just want to get in to feed starving people, and she was blocked. So, you know, those kinds of things cry out, and France has raised their voices repeatedly. And so maybe you can speak to some of that. Should Aliyev be indicted by the International Criminal Court for this? I mean, at some point, we always do it so far after the fact that I know it's hard, to do things as they're occurring. But I mean, it might have a chilling effect on further atrocities being committed. If you could, Mr. Ocampo, really elaborate on this duty to prevent and how well or poorly you think we are doing it. You mentioned some of it in your testimony, but I think that's being lost on the administration, and maybe I'm missing something. I hope I am. But they need to be, I think, far more focused on this. I remember when ISIS was slaughtering people, we had hearings on that. I had 7 of them, frankly. And I introduced a bill that became law called the Iraq and Syria Genocide Relief and Accountability Act. It took a long time to get passed. It was signed into law. But it was to help the Chaldean Catholics and the Yazidis after the fact. Many of them were in Erbil by that time. But Jeff Fortenberry, and Drew Bowling is here, they worked on a very powerful sense of the Congress resolution that put the entire House on record about the ISIS genocide. And the State Department twiddled their thumbs and would not call it a genocide. And we heard that the lawyers were laboring over, the minutia of the convention, which, again, I've read it many times. It seemed like everything they were doing fit, most of the 5 criteria for genocide, as you have pointed out so well, Mr. Ocampo here. Finally, after the House did what it did, John Kerry finally, somewhat reluctantly, said, yeah, it is a genocide. Why does it take so long? And I think here, starvation, we all remember what Mengistu did in Ethiopia when he used food as a weapon. And now Aliyev is using food as a weapon. And I would also add, as you all know so well, medicines and other basics that are absolutely needed. How many people are sick that aren't getting their medicines and could die or be seriously impaired health-wise for the rest of their lives because of that? The RCRC is not getting through. I mean, imagine that. The Red Cross can't get through a barrier. So, the voices have to be ratcheted up, and that goes right to the president, the vice president, to Secretary Blinken, and everyone else down the line. So if you could speak to some of those issues, I would appreciate it. And I ask about, should Aliyev be indicted? Is that something that the ICC should be investigating with that in mind? He's had a sorry history of repression that gets unaccounted for by the international community. Well, now he's doing it in a way that is a bona fide, as you've pointed out so well, genocide.
Well,
please.
Let me start with your question about investigation of President Aliyev. The International Criminal Court today cannot investigate him because neither Azerbaijan nor Armenia are state parties. So when they are not state parties, the International Criminal Court cannot do it. But this could change.
The Security Council could do it, but
exactly.
Russia would veto it.
Yes. Well, there are different ways to change that, including Armenia could ratify the treaty, and eventually people escaping from Azerbaijan could provide jurisdiction to the International Criminal Court. But for me, the way, I think he has the evidence, Professor Philip has the evidence, so we can wait for an investigation or punishment. For me, what you say about how much time these people could survive, that's the real question. Professor Philip, again, has better answer than me because I don't know the facts very well. I focus on the most clear thing because he described meticulously many incidents that to present the case in a criminal court, you should investigate deeply and connect who produced these crimes. The Nagorno-Karabakh, the Lachine corridor blockade is such a clear-cut case that's why I focus on it, because it's a very clear-cut case where the responsible is obviously President Aliyev, no doubt. And he personally was put on notice by Secretary Blinken, by the International Court of Justice, by the UN Secretary General Guterres, by the Macron, the President of France. So he talked to global leaders. They explained to him, you had to unblock. So there is no excuse. He is ignoring everyone while committing what is a genocidal act under Article 2C, creating conditions to destroy the life of these people. So there are many possibilities ahead, but something very simple, and it's something I think we should explore how to say, but President Biden or Secretary Blinken can officially tell Mr. Aliyev, remove tomorrow, unconditionally, the Lachine corridor, or we consider you responsible for genocide. That's simple, very simple, and immediately. We can do it next week. So it could be done immediately. And of course, that will trigger a lot of consequences, including in the cooperation between other countries to Azerbaijan. So I think I'm not against any of the measures proposed by Professor Phillips, but I suggest something very simple could be done, connected with what you say. What we are learning, what we learn is that the international system is not equipped to deal with genocide. So we need to try new things. And as Samantha Powers described, not just in The Problem of Hell, in the second book he wrote, she presented dialogues she had with President Obama, and how President Obama explained to her, no, I will not act. So there are political reasons not to act. I saw that in my time as prosecutor. I remember I was going to indict President Bashir, and a country sent to me his legal advisor, explained to me, look, with your single agenda, you cross a country agenda. And the country agenda is more complicated. The country agenda includes oil in Sudan, relation with China, relation with Africa. He mentioned support for the war on terror. So he mentioned different things. And I said, well, but you told me that when it's a genocide, my duty is to cross all the agendas. I said, well, you get the decision, is fine. So I did it, and I got the decision. But in this case, there is no prosecutor. So there is no one with a single agenda to protect genocide, except this committee, this commission. This commission, you decided that you will do it. And that's why I believe the lesson we are learning is the U.S. Congress Commission start to be active and focus not just in long-term sanctions, focus on why are we denying this genocide? Because that's a critical point. As you say, it took so much time to the Yazidis. But this time, we can do it. Because this genocide, the one committed blocking the Lachine corridor, that needs no more proofs. There are 15 judges of the International Court of Justice unanimously deciding you should open the Lachine corridor, because if not, you are producing risk for the life of the Nagorno-Karabakh people. They say that. So it's already done. So the remaining issue is the genocide intention. Okay, I believe it's clear, but to confirm, President Biden called, Secretary Blinken called, Mr. Aliyev, remove or you have genocide intention. That's it. And that will be done in a week. And that's why I believe this commission could have a chance to send information to the executive branch. Explain to them what you got. Ask them explanation why they are not doing it. Because I understand there is a need of negotiation there. but the negotiation could not include, as part of the method, a genocide. And U.S. could not be part of a negotiation where a method is genocide. No. When there's a genocide, okay, stop the genocide and then we negotiate. You cannot be encouraging parties to reach an agreement when one of the party is a victim of genocide. And that is for me the lesson learned, that the lesson we learned in all the previous genocides. And the new thing, I don't think in the past, a commission like this commission was taking so much urgency action and making the case very clear and trying to request clarity from the executive branch. Why you are doing this? You can solve this. And their option coming, the next General Assembly in the UN is coming, President Biden will talk. President Biden was the first president who recognized the Armenian genocide. Never again means it's not repeated. And that's why I think you could promote a new leadership in the US in dealing with genocide.
Thank you.
Mr. Ocampo, you explained why the ICC couldn't act.
Yes.
Let me just pose the rhetorical question. Since when does the United States ask the UN's permission to act? We have national legislation that gives us the tools to arrest and prosecute perpetrators of genocide, such as the Global Magnitsky Act or Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act. Why don't we hear our leaders talking about existing U.S. law and enforcing it? And let me just raise also a rhetorical question about Samantha Power, whose book is terrific, who I have great respect for. As a scholar, she called out those who turned a blind eye. As a U.S. official, she's been silent. So what moral equanimity does she show towards the victims in Darfur or in genocide if she is going to allow her voice to be silenced? Let me stop there, and we can think about other...
Can I make a comment? I appreciate your comment on the possibility to use U.S. prosecution. That's very interesting and very promising. I was a prosecutor, so I think I saw the importance to prosecute people. But I don't think we have time to prepare change of the law, or even to indict President Aliyev, because as you question, I suppose the wind there will really affect the people in Nagorno-Karabakh. So that's why I am not opposed, in support of your idea to look for new mechanisms to investigate and prosecute these cases, but we cannot wait for prosecutions. We should prevent. And that's why today you call this urgent meeting. I understand it's the first meeting in this time of the Congress. If the Congress is still empty and you move, and I think that speed is what we need. That speed, the speed you impressed today is the speed we need. And the next mechanism is President Biden, Secretary Blinken. You don't need to convince them because they are committed to prevent genocide. So they are committed in different statements, different strategies. They are absolutely committed. They need information. Now you collect information. You have the testimony of Professor Phillips. You have my testimony. I can add the reports I produce. I can add to you the report that another expert, Juan Mendez, who was the first UN advisor on genocide, produced. And then you can provide to the White House with all the elements they need to make operational the pledges and the strategies to prevent genocide. And that will be the lesson learned. Focus on today, no wait for punishment, no wait for sanctions. Focus on today. The executive branch could confront President Aliyev and telling him, President Aliyev, if you continue doing what you are doing, we consider you as a genocide. And that's obvious, because that's what President Aliyev understood. President Blinken called him in January, called him again, and today is informed that he called him again, but he's ignoring him. Okay, why? President Aliyev will decide. No, U.S. will be in charge. You can say, look, I told you not to do it. We consider you a genocide. Stop it. And you consider you a genocider. And that's it. And then we'll trigger all the other mechanisms, and we can investigate the different incidents that Professor Philip collect evidence. We have time to conduct the investigation. We have no time to save the life of these people. And that's why I appreciate your speed.
Let me just, for the record, correct one matter. These laws, the Magnitsky Act, don't have to be amended or adapted. They already exist. What it takes is the political will to exercise them. By being silent, by not acting, the Biden administration is making a statement that it values Azeri oil and gas more than it does the lives of Armenians and Artsakh. So my advice would be, if these guys are coming to New York for the General Assembly, send a paddy wagon out to JFK Airport and lock them up and put them in the Manhattan County Jail.
I'm not against. I'm not against at all. My point is, in the meantime, next week, we should do something to stop. Because I like your idea, but look, when you read what happened with Torrijos in Panama, there was discussion why we're indicting a guy who was our ally. That is the dynamics inside the governments. They deal with people in government who are not perfectly clear people. Many of them are criminals, and that's why they are used to these partners. So that's why I'm not against. You like to do that, I will support any prosecution of President Aliyev. But in the meantime, we need a more political and faster solution. That's my point. Because these people will die. And if the people who die are not born again when we prosecute and convict Aliyev. That's the problem.
Let me also be clear about what is the agenda here.
Yeah.
Azerbaijan wants to ethnically cleanse Artsakh of its Armenian population. That's why it's making
That's
Artsakh
genocide.
unlivable, and that is genocide.
Yeah.
We don't know what will happen in the near future, but I'm worried about Azerbaijan's mobilization and measures that they may take to inflict harm on the broader population in Artsakh. And if that happens, then there's no waffling on the facts, there's no waffling on mixed priorities. We will have to act at that juncture.
Yeah, okay, but I understand what you say, and that's why I believe it's so important that the Congress open this meeting and categorize today what already happened in the genocide. And therefore, all the agenda of negotiations have to change, because you cannot put the victim of genocide in the hands of the genocider. And so that's why I understand the serious prospect, and that's why my proposal is to act in 1 week, not in 1 month. We have to act now. And include, before you prosecute people, you make clear politically what is happening. And I think that is the next step. And the good thing is, you have you, Chairman, managing this. And then you can also be clear with the Congress, with the executive branch about this. You have to prepare a very nice letter to President Biden and Secretary Blinken explaining in detail what you saw and the need. Take lessons and learn and implement what they propose. Because when you read the strategy of President Biden to deal with genocide, he considered, following the Elie Wiesel Act, that a genocide affects U.S. national interests. It's a security matter for U.S. And it's right what he say. That we ignore some who saying genocide against the Kurds, and then you have to end with the war in Iraq. So it's true. History teaches us that we ignore genocides. The consequence 10 years later are much worse, more costly for the U.S. in particular. So that's why you can write a very nice letter to President Biden explaining that, supporting his pledge, supporting his strategy. Okay, do it now.
We will, and I'll do it today. So thank you for that recommendation. I do hope there are a number of news media that are covering this, and I hope the message that goes forth from here after both of your tremendous testimonies is that delay is denial. I mean, we could have waited a week or 2 or 3. I mean, I wanted to do it last week, this hearing, and we just couldn't pull it together because starvation happens in a rolling way, and more people will die, more people get sicker because of their fragility, particularly the elderly and others. So delay is denial, and I think your point, Chief Prosecutor, was very well taken of as to what they could do, and they could do it today, or they could do it tomorrow, but they have to do it quickly. I mean, I was the House author of the Magnitsky Act, so I certainly understand the importance of sanctioning and denying visas, and of course the other parts of it, which is the inability to engage in commerce. That's all important. But that does take time, and we have to go through a process to go through names, and you certainly gave us a lot of names, Mr. Phillips. Thank you for that. And I hope we'll convey that to the appropriate people as well. But delay is denial, and you've said it. They need to say immediately to Aliyev that this is a genocide. Stop it. So I thank you for that clarity, and that it just has to be done.
Congressman Smith, if you want to adapt some of the contents of my testimony
Yes.
into a letter to the administration, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you. No, it's
I think the entire
yeah.
testimony.
We'll include it, and yours too, Chief Prosecutor. Anything else you would like to add? Because Mike Bilarak is a member of our commission who wanted to be here but couldn't be. He did have a number of questions, but one of them was about Turkey. Can you describe Turkey's current position regarding what is happening in Nagorno-Karabakh, and if there's any pressure that the United States can put on Turkey to influence the Azerbaijani government?
Influence the Azerbaijan government? It exerts partial control over the Azerbaijan government. Shaping its policy is not a major task for Turkey. Turkey is complicit. You saw U.S.-made F-16s in aerial photography during the 44-day war. We have a lot of leverage over Turkey. We should stop thinking of Turkey as a country whose assistance we need, and recognize that Turkey needs our assistance to reintegrate into the family of nations.
Well put. Anything else before we close? Thank you so very much, and we will do that letter. We'll do it today. And reach out by phone to the administration. We did invite them to be here. The invitation is open for a follow-up hearing. I'd love to have them come and provide testimony and their insights and counsel and what they're doing. So thank you so much. The hearing's adjourned.
Thank you.